The town of Calera, Alabama, is a sanctuary of suburban quietude, a place where families plant roots, and the nights are usually defined by a peaceful, heavy silence. But on the morning of January 13th, 2018, that silence didn't signify safety. It masked a tragedy that would soon captivate the nation. As the winter frost clung to the lawns and the neighborhood remained draped in the pre-dawn shadows, a discovery was about to turn a suburban driveway into a crime scene. A young mother lay on the cold pavement, her life extinguished in the dark of night. The tranquility of the morning was shattered by a scream that never came, only the cold presence of mortality. Kat West was a devoted mother with a personality that could light up any room. She was 42 years old, full of life, and deeply involved in the digital world, where her social media presence was more than just a hobby. It was a window into a life that seemed, from the outside, to be perfectly balanced. She was the anchor of her home, managing the complexities of family life while cultivating a vibrant online persona known as Kitty Cat West. She was a woman who lived loudly, which made the silence of her death even more chilling. The night of the tragedy was a typical Alabama winter evening, with the air biting and the clock ticking toward the early hours of Saturday morning. There was an atmospheric tension that no one could have predicted. Inside the West home, the family had settled in, or so it seemed. The street was empty, and the world was asleep. Yet something was unfolding in the darkness that would leave a permanent scar on the community. Just before 5 a.m, a neighbor heading out for work noticed something peculiar. Near the West family's SUV, a shape was sprawled across the concrete. As the neighbor drew closer, the horrifying reality became clear. It was Kat. She was partially clothed, wearing only a light top, and her body was cold to the touch. Lying just a few inches from her hand was a heavy, distinctive bottle of lucid absinthe. There was no immediate explanation for why she was outside in the freezing cold, dressed so sparsely, or why her life had ended so abruptly just steps from her front door. When the first responders arrived, they were met with a scene that offered more questions than answers. There was no evidence of a struggle, no broken glass, and no signs that an intruder had trespassed onto the property. It was a clean yet haunting tableau of death. The initial confusion among the officers was palpable. How could a healthy woman simply die in her own driveway without any obvious sign of foul play? As the sun began to rise, Jeff West, Kat's husband, provided the first pieces of the puzzle. Jeff was a man with a background in security and the military. He told the investigators that the night had been a quiet one. According to his initial account, he had gone to bed around 10:30 p.m., leaving Kat up. He claimed to have fallen into a deep sleep, unaware that his wife was even outside, let alone dying on the pavement. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. His story seemed plausible at first. A tragic accident involving a night of drinking that went horribly wrong. However, the investigation took a sharp turn when detectives began to analyze the digital footprints left behind. While Jeff insisted he was immobile and asleep, the forensic data from his own smartphone told a radically different story. The internal sensors, specifically the data from the health app, recorded movement during the hours he claimed to be unconscious. These digital steps contradicted his alibi, revealing that while Kat's heart was stopping, Jeff West was active, shifting the entire case into a dark reality. The evidence was damning. The investigation into Kat's death quickly moved beyond the initial shock and began to pierce the dark veil of the couple's seemingly ordinary life. Detectives didn't just see a grieving husband. They saw a man with a specific set of skills. Jeff West was a former Army medic and a trained security guard. He's a man whose professional life revolved around protocols and trauma mechanics. This background made his assertions of being a heavy sleeper even more suspicious and unsettling to the investigators. They began to wonder if his calm, measured responses were the result of shock or the product of a disciplined mind, trying to manage a narrative of his own. As the digital forensics team delved into the data from the couple's mobile devices, the discrepancies in Jeff's story became impossible to ignore. Kat's smartphone provided a silent testimony of her final moments. The cold digital data from her health application indicated that all significant movement ceased at approximately 10:54 p.m. In sharp contrast, Jeff's phone, which he claimed was charging while he slept from 10:30 p.m. onwards, showed a burst of unexpected activity. Between 11:03 p.m. and 11:10 p.m., the device recorded a series of steps. This wasn't just a minor error. It was a fundamental contradiction of his alibi. If Jeff was moving around during the exact window when Kat's life was ending, his entire story began to crumble into pieces. This digital conflict forced investigators to look for a motive, and they soon uncovered a side of Kat's secret life that many never suspected. Under the name Kitty Cat West, she had cultivated a secret and lucrative online career as an adult content creator. She shared provocative photos for a subscription fee. While Jeff was aware of this career, investigators began to suspect it was a source of deep-seated friction. The perfect suburban image was a mask for a marriage under significant financial and emotional strain. Then a theory emerged. A heated argument about her career, perhaps fueled by the very absinthe found at the scene, had reached a violent and tragic breaking point. Physical evidence matched the digital trail. The medical examiner's autopsy report finally arrived with a conclusion that shattered any remaining hope that Kat had died of a simple tumble. The cause of death was listed as blunt force trauma to the head. It was a devastating blow that had caused fatal internal hemorrhaging. The investigators turned their attention back to the green bottle of expensive lucid absinthe found near Kat's hand. While it initially looked like a discarded remnant of a late-night drink, forensic testing revealed a much more sinister purpose. The bottle was heavy, made of thick glass, and its weight made it a formidable and lethal weapon. It's what truly sealed the undeniable evidence and investigators' suspicions were the blood patterns and the placement of the bottle. Forensic analysts noted that the blood found on the base of the bottle didn't match the physics of a random fall. If Kat had simply tripped, the bottle shouldn't have carried the specific and unusual transfer of blood found by the laboratory. The evidence suggested the bottle hadn't just fallen. It had been held, swung, and then carefully placed to make the scene look like an accident. To the police, it looked like a staged scene, a clumsy attempt by someone who thought they could manipulate a complex crime scene. The forensic pressure finally led to a decisive moment. Investigators felt they had enough to move forward. Jeff West was arrested and charged with the murder of his wife. As he was led away, the image of the stoic soldier was broadcast. Yet even as the prosecution prepared their case, the defense was sharpening its own tools. They were ready to argue that the police had misinterpreted the silent digital data and that Kat's death was nothing more than a series of unfortunate accidents. The stage was set for a long legal battle that would hinge on seconds of movement and drops of blood left behind. The wood-paneled courtroom in Shelby County became the stage for a final harrowing act in the life of Kat West. As the trial began, the air was thick with the scent of old paper and the heavy, stifling silence of anticipation. The prosecution wasted no time in painting a chilling portrait of Jeff West. They depicted him not as a grieving widower, but as a man who had finally snapped under the weight of a double life. They argued that the Kitty Kat West persona, which Kat had cultivated with such care, had become a source of toxic resentment. In their narrative, the financial pressures and the unconventional nature of her online work had turned their suburban dream into a pressure cooker. They contended that on that freezing January night, the tension boiled over into a fit of rage, and the heavy bottle of lucid absinthe became a convenient and lethal tool of destruction. The defense team, led by seasoned legal minds, countered with a narrative of a tragic, unavoidable accident. They focused their strategy almost entirely on the accidental fall theory. To support this, they called upon forensic experts and toxicologists, who highlighted a crucial piece of evidence. Kat's blood alcohol content was 0.23, nearly 3 times the legal limit. They argued that in the biting cold of the Alabama night, a woman as intoxicated as Kat could easily lose her footing. They suggested she might have stumbled while reaching for the car door, striking her head with devastating force against the SUV's frame or the unforgiving concrete. To the defense, the digital data from Jeff's phone was a red herring, a set of misinterpreted sensors that couldn't possibly prove a murder had occurred. The emotional weight of the proceedings reached its peak during the testimony of friends and family. The jury was forced to look into the eyes of those who loved both the victim and the accused. The most tragic figure, though never taking the stand, was the couple's young daughter, whose life had been irrevocably shattered in a single night. Witnesses described a household that, while under stress, appeared to be held together by genuine affection. This human element made the jury's task nearly impossible. They had to weigh the cold, clinical data of digital steps and health app timestamps against the complex, messy reality of a human marriage. Was Jeff a calculated killer, or a man caught in the gears of a tragic misunderstanding? After a grueling deliberation that lasted for hours, the jury finally emerged with a verdict that sent shockwaves through the community. They did not find Jeff West guilty of intentional murder, but they refused to acquit him. Instead, they reached a middle ground verdict: manslaughter. This decision suggested that while the jury believed Jeff played a direct role in Kat's death, they were not convinced it was a premeditated or intentional act of murder. It was a legal compromise that felt like a partial truth to many, leaving the core of the mystery unresolved. The judge eventually sentenced Jeff West to 16 years in prison. The public reaction was immediate and fiercely divided. For Kat's family, it offered a measure of accountability, a formal recognition that she had not simply fallen. For Jeff's supporters, however, it was a profound miscarriage of justice based on circumstantial evidence. As Jeff was led away to begin his sentence, the rift between the two families seemed wider than ever, a permanent scar on the landscape. The case of Kat West remains a haunting enigma, even with the legal proceedings concluded. The gaps in the evidence, the missing minutes, the silent bottle, and the conflicting digital footprints still fuel debates. Was it an impulsive act of violence born of a fractured marriage, or truly a series of unfortunate events that led to a freak accident? The absolute truth may be buried in the cold Alabama soil. As we reflect on Kat's life, we are left with the image of a vibrant woman whose light was extinguished too soon. Was it a tragic accident or a crime hidden behind a simple story? The truth about Kat West may never be fully known, leaving only the quiet echoes of a suburban night and the memory of a life cut short in the shadows.